Hi, everyone, and welcome to our third episode of the Latest in Travel podcast. I'm very excited about the guest that we have with us today, Mr. David Chestler, who is the president and co-founder of ProVision Partners, which is a consultancy firm that gives strategic advice to companies on a range of topics, including distribution and technology. And David has over 30 years of experience, so quite extensive experience in the industry. So David, I'll hand over to you just to explain a little bit to those who are watching and might not know, what is it exactly that you've been doing all this time, and what have you been up to?
What have I been doing for 30 years? Sounds like a long time when you actually mention it, but it's an interesting journey. And first of all, Melissa, thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to speak with you, and I love your audience. They're always engaged and excited about travel and technology and everything about it. So, 30 years of journey. I started wanting to be in advertising. I thought that was a creative world, and back in the day, there was a television program called Bewitched, and she was a witch and he was an advertising exec, and it looked so glamorous and cool that kind of fomented in my mind. At the time, I couldn't get into advertising, but travel technology was starting up, and it was an interesting period. I started to work in a small QSR, quick serve restaurant company called Burger King, right out of university, and then found the wanderlust that I loved big cities. I loved traveling, and the opportunity presented itself to work with a large publishing company and get into this company called UTEL. It was a representation company in the day, and 6,500 hotels worldwide. And we did a lot of work together to build it in the Americas. That started that journey. Being able to work with people from Hong Kong, from London, from Paris, and have them as friends and colleagues, it created this global excitement that I started to find myself feeding on. And from that, I went to a number of different companies, from large foundational companies to small startups. Went to a small startup in the .com age, putting video on the web. And that was exciting. But 9/11 happened, had to transition, and went to Pegasus with Mr. Davis, the founder, and Gideon Dean, Keith Cotton, Bill Nicholson, some great guys. And really learned about payments and distribution and central res. And it was a wonderful experience with some amazing people as we scaled and acquired companies and grew. And that started to kind of tease my excitement about private equity and investments and company acquisitions, and how do you find the right cultures and technologies to work. It was a really neat experience, and the management team was very inclusive, which was helpful. It's culture. Culture becomes very important as you grow up in this industry, and you start to find a company to work with. And from that, I evolved and went to several other companies that were kind of starting up, Whiteboard Labs and Richfield Hospitality with Scepter, Birch Street Systems right out of Pegasus, and then I found my way, SiteMinder and Cognitive, into a point where I wanted to do it for a lot of different people and give back. And there were a couple gentlemen that I met with at a high-tech technology event, and we talked about forming a practice like a law firm where we could advise and help and not be as expensive as some of the very large consultancies, and kind of do good in the world, right? We're more focused on outcomes than trying to get hours. And it really is about doing the right thing for owners, founders, private equity. And you mentioned technology. We do some technology work, analyzing tech stack and how it helps owners and operators fulfill their North Star vision of what do I want to do with this property? How do I want to engage? That kind of thing. So it took me on this journey, and it was phenomenal. Loved it. And that's what I've been doing for 30 years.
Nice. And just to sort of fast forward, well, going back to what you originally wanted to do, which was advertising, does that fall under the umbrella of what you're doing currently at ProVision as well? Or is that, because that would be an interesting way to wrap that all up?
Close the circle. We do media and PR and branding, more from the strategic perspective. We do have a media PR group within the firm, which enables us to help with messaging and things of that nature, and some rebranding exercises. We're actually going through that ourselves right now, transforming a little bit into kind of the evolution of ProVision partners, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's always interesting to hear about like the evolution of one's career path, because funnily enough, like something I initially tried to do, like when I was fresh out of school, was to apply to work at Emirates because I wanted to travel. And that was supposed to be my ticket for travel. And then I got into journalism, and then from there ended up, what I'm doing now, which is, in the travel industry. So I think it's always quite neat when you see that circle kind of turn around a bit. So cool. I guess like sort of fast forwarding now to the present, with all the changes and things currently going on in our industry, it seems like the past 5 years has been jam-packed with, things after another. We had the pandemic now with like sort of the conflict situations going on in the world. What would you say is top of mind for you currently in this scope of events, and why?
Well, the pandemic did a lot. I mean, we were, as an industry, hitting record growth. We were unstoppable. There was this huge transformation of travelers as you started to see alternative inventory and Airbnb come into the market, and meetings and conventions were getting larger, and it was just scaling. It was becoming, to me, more than international, it was becoming global. That's what we were. It was that globalization. COVID put the brakes on very quickly and made us rethink everything, from how we engage with people from a distance on cameras and microphones, and it transformed the world, I think. I don't know all to the positive. As you see, there are more conflicts. We're more polarized in some of our ability to actually speak kindly to people we might disagree with. We've lost something in that, and I'm hoping we start to find kindness again, and patience, and the ability to talk about our differences and accept people with differences. That's something that I found with travel was phenomenal, is that you'd be sitting next to someone, you may not agree with them, but you were having the same amazing experience. That created a bridge. That created the opportunity for you to talk and be friendly. You don't have to agree with everything or even like and love them, but you could be civil. And that was something that I really enjoyed about travel and meeting all my friends from around the world in our small conferences. The COVID kind of changed that, or as I called it, the zombie apocalypse, right? It kind of slowed everything down. We saw the canals in Venice, beautiful, with dolphins swimming again. We saw, I mean, it transformed the world briefly. We're coming back, and we keep now going to, well, are we close to those levels again? Are we back? And I'm almost looking at this transformation where we're going to this, contactless, and housekeeping. Is it there? Is it not? The service levels, are they there or are they not? The bleisure that we'll talk about is how that's transforming. That working nomads can live anywhere and work, and what is that doing to the future generations who are looking for careers, but also the fulfillment in what they're doing in their jobs? And I think that's where this transformational age is really something that I'm keeping an eye on from, I had a minor in sociology. So I kind of enjoy looking at the world as a student, right? And understanding these types of things as you would as a journalist, right?
Yeah, and I have to say I agree with you about this, because I think with the more person-to-person interactions, it's a lot easier to humanize the person. And I really agree with what you said about like the disagreements, and I think when we're all behind avatars and behind, the online, our keyboards and stuff, it's like it's easy to be more courageous in your disagreeability and not be, I don't know, I guess have like a real two-way conversation. So that is something I think is a bit of a concern. And I do hope that in some ways, we can kind of get that balance back.
I
And
don't
even,
know. Technology is messing with that too, Melissa. I mean, you start to look at the algorithms of people looking at their social media and what's presented to them. Personalization in travel is going to be very important. We're seeing some personalization coming through in social media, and the videos that you see based on the videos you watch, and I won't name a brand, but there are a number of them that will present and continue to present certain things that start to now shape the way you think. And we're seeing that. And that's where I think we need to start to pull back again and gain control, almost curate our own news and media feeds, and be less inclined to believe everything that's being put on, and start to question again, And I think that's back to travel. That's what it does. It puts you face to face with these opportunities to learn and listen and have conversations. Again, hopefully civil conversations, right?
Yeah, and I guess being present also in the travel, that it's not just, oh, let me find that Instagram worthy moment but yeah, right. I think it's something, especially with I think the new, like the Gen Z generation of travelers and stuff, which is like, they're digital natives, essentially, like getting that balance would be, interesting to see how that goes. I know for myself, I'm making more of a conscious effort to try and get, I don't know, get out more after these last 2 years. I am an introvert by nature, so it was easy to kind of withdraw for that time. Personally, I think I had an easier time than some other people I know. But yeah, it's, have to make that push, get out of the comfort zone. And like you say, break down those barriers to understand people a little bit more deeper.
There you go.
Yeah. And so you mentioned a bit like about your experience, and you have a lot of obviously like startup experience, and you're quite passionate about startup culture. So I guess considering today's, changing market landscape and your extensive experience, what would you say, like how important is startup culture for travel and hospitality companies to not only adapt to all these changes, but even like to innovate in these conditions?
Yeah. Well, innovation and adaptation, and those are, great buzzwords, because they really do help you start to think bigger. I heard a saying once. It was dream big, think small, and scale. Because what happens is you need to have that vision, right? And you need to be able to then execute and tactically, but you also then need to be able to grow rapidly. That cultural mindset, that ability to know your business, know your customer, that's important. And that's a startup culture. I think Steve Jobs, when he was forming Apple, he's created a number of videos of lessons that he's learned. And one of them talks about the startup culture and the mindset to be able to take a role and own it. And you need to be able to execute on your role for the entire company to execute. Everyone has a critical responsibility to each other, to the business, and to the customers. And it's that focus when you're a startup that enables you really to move mountains. And that's the excitement that I get. Early days when I joined, whether it was Pegasus or even my own startup or SiteMinder, These were exciting times, right? Where we were able to build together globally and have ideas and test them and fail quickly and recover and move forward. That was a wonderful time of growth. I remember Rate Gain when I went there shortly after Birch Street. They were, trying to scale and grow, and it was a great opportunity for us to transform into a much larger company. Even though we were focused in India, it allowed us to really scale rapidly with that mindset and culture that was created there. Very exciting times. It's that type of energy in small companies that allow them to kind of form the nucleus and then grow into bigger companies or unicorns, the way SiteMinder did. So that's the kind of energy or culture that I talk about in startups. And I think you'll hear it in other videos and other conversations where everyone has a real role to play, and they all come at it with the focus of, I am important in the business and my responsibility is to deliver and execute. When you get into a larger company and you lose that focus and that vision of where you fit into everything, many times you could lose sight of what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to move things. Things can start to delay. They can start to push right on a Gantt chart. It becomes very difficult to maintain that culture if all of a sudden you don't have that full vision of what am I here for and why am I doing this, right? So that's where I think the startup culture is important, no matter how big your company, that you maintain that excitement, that passion, and that, I guess, understanding of where you fit in the world, right?
Yeah. And I guess that autonomy as well of like knowing what's expected and doing and just executing to the best of the ability is probably quite important especially like in terms of engaging employees as well. I would, from an employee perspective, I would say that's something that, I don't know, gives a purpose and a vision to the work that's done. So yeah. And in what ways do you think that startup culture can impact on creativity? And we touched a bit on employee engagement and retention. What ways do you think it can impact it for the better? And what would that look like to you?
Well, think about the youthful culture we have now. I'm in a different generation. I came from the time where you worked from 9 to 5 or, whatever it was. And it's a different culture now. I want to work from 7 to 12, and then I want to take off and go see this, and then I'll come back and work again. Or it's, how do you maintain that interest, that passion, so that people do feel that they have a path forward? I'm not stuck in a role that I'm going to do for the next, 50 years. It's not like that. And I think what is important is understanding and having that vision of where can I go? What can I do? How do I improve as a human and myself, right? I want to mature. I want to grow in my role. I want to be president. I want to be a head of sales or a head of service delivery and support or a general manager, right? It's how do I get there? And if your business, your company can't show people how they do that, how they can progress, how they can learn, what that means, it makes it very difficult to retain that staff. And if you can't fail without being chastised and beaten, that doesn't really set the bar very high, right? You're going to have very safe and simple KPIs or OKRs that you achieve, and that's not really going to move the business forward as you might want to. So I think providing the opportunity for people to see and understand their opportunities, progressions, how they can mature, that also helps the business determine how it can mature and grow and transform. And that's, again, back to culture. How do you care and nurture for your people? Because they're the ones that are taking care of your customers, right?
Yeah, I agree with that. And especially looking at, you mentioned Steve Jobs, but like a lot of the great innovators, like Elon Musk, Marie Curie, all these, people throughout history that achieved really great things. It's almost like they didn't have this fear of, well, they bucked the tide pretty much. So they didn't care like what anyone thought. And I guess sometimes some would argue to the extreme. I'm actually reading a book on this at the moment about how like the temperament, of not really caring like what people thought was like a way that almost enabled that, innovation to take place. So I guess bringing it back to the cultural perspective, like encouraging that culture of don't be afraid to make mistakes, be more courageous. I can see how that would be very important in driving that innovation within companies. Cool, thanks for that. And in terms of like, because you mentioned before our call a bit about like combining sort of the legacy culture with more of the startup culture. So specifically speaking, like in what ways are legacy companies embracing that, in your opinion? And what has been the impact specifically in the context of our industry?
They don't always embrace it. That's I think part of the challenge and why you don't always see great companies, right? And that's why consultants have jobs. What we find is the companies that are brave enough to open up and enable exploration. We do some exercises around design-led thinking, and that allows you to take more of a holistic view of a business, of a product, of a service, and better understand its impact, to break it apart, put it back together. That's a lot of what's starting to happen now. And what you're seeing in our industry, because technology and e-commerce and these practical applications of technology to drive revenue are starting to break down these silos, so that now marketing and IT need to collaborate, especially if I'm going to have these systems working together interoperably. I need to better understand my guest. Marketing likes to call them personas. Well, IT doesn't know the persona. They know how to build a web engine or to create an integration between platforms and systems. They could use some of the technologies to recognize and credential online so that they could provide a more personalized offer or a dynamic price or similar. That's starting to break down these silos where organizations can start to test, how do I do things differently? My legacy technologies, which IHG and Amadeus started to look at years ago, evolved into something that we now look at as attribute based and search and sale. And that enables a different type of operation within the room and inventory and rates, so that you're now starting to look at a hotel differently than you ever did before in that sale and that technological engagement. That's an evolution. I don't want to say it's disruptive, in that it's more of a renaissance. We're refining the way we're doing things. We still haven't broken the PMS to CRS to this, or PMS to RMS, we still have our acronyms. The legacy's there, but we're starting to break down the barriers and blend it we've termed it marketecture within hospitality technology group in our work groups, because ultimately you're trying to determine how everything interrelates and how that information then translates into an experience, to a flight and a destination. It evolves into something that is more than just bits and bytes. And that's the exciting part of this legacy transforming, right? I think that evolution, that renaissance will continue, especially as you start seeing machine learning and AI and all of these not new technologies. It's been around since the 50s, but it's now the generative AI has kind of sparked lightning and has gotten everyone very excited. But then also, is it Terminator, which, Hollywood was very good at kind of giving you that doom and gloom scenario of, we're all going to die. And so I think there's this teeter-totter that's going on that we're figuring out. It's not going to go to a sentient being that's all of a sudden going to, kill all the humans. That's not what it's about. It really is, and I've said this on LinkedIn and other places, it's not AI that's going to kind of take over. It's humans using AI that will improve and optimize the experience, the technologies, the engagement, the offers. That's what's going to happen. How do I better use these technologies to optimize my role, my engagement within the larger environment? And ultimately, as a consumer, how does it help me better experience what you're offering me, right? And that's the exciting part of it, that culture, technology, that's all starting to evolve into this new operational way.
And I guess also in terms of this evolution, it's also bringing the customers along with that journey as well, because they're especially looking at different market segments. Maybe you get some that aren't quite, like AI is just like, whoa, what is this, interface? It would be.
Yeah. Four Seasons will never use a chatbot like that. But will Four Seasons use facial recognition so they know who's coming? Will they use a translation solution to enable them to speak any language? Or will they use that type of preferred and preferential, fuzzy logic to better understand an offer that they can provide to you, right? There are different types of AI that can be used or technologies that can be deployed to optimize the experience. At High Tech, we saw a hologram, very interesting. HoloConnect, I think, is the company. And it was a large hologram of Frank Wolf from HFTP. And he was welcoming everyone to High Tech. And I thought that was brilliant. And I was at an event, as you do, drinking cocktails with friends after High Tech. And I was speaking with some folks from Four Seasons. And we were playing with the idea of where could you put a hologram like this at a high touch? And was, well, what about the golf course? Wouldn't it be neat to have a hologram of a golf pro pop up and tell you how to play the hole, show you which way to go, which club you might want to use, and provide that type of direct engagement, even though there's no one there? It's using technology at a high touch level for that type of discerning traveler, right? So thinking creatively from the 5 or 6 star down to the, let's say, select and limited service, or even a hostel, how can you use technologies to improve the experience? And that's, I think, that's what our job is to help translate these technologies to companies and help them engage in a way that is continuity for the customer, but also for the colleague. Because the biggest problem we have right now is the breakdown and understanding of the owners of what all this technology is about and why it costs so much. Why do I need to spend this much on a chatbot? Why do I need Meraki as for my Wi-Fi? Why do I need? It's a lot of questions like that. So I think we need to do a better job explaining to the owners, the asset owners, why we're suggesting certain technologies and what that translates to for the customer and the guest and the colleague, right? How do you deliver it all?
Yeah, and I have to say the hologram anecdote is like way ahead. Like for me, I'm just like, if we have something that simplifies like booking a flight, that's already a really good start.
Perfect.
Just like everything I need, exactly what I'm looking for, no noise, like just, but yeah, the hologram idea sounds cool as well.
Right?
I have to say. Cool. So in the spirit of kind of bringing things together, and I guess we mentioned consolidation and kind of getting these systems all under sort of an umbrella, sort of moving on to more of like the more consumer side and the travel side. travel is undoubtedly, it's a powerful means to break down barriers and foster an understanding between cultures. And I guess for you personally, and this is quite a fun question, I think, what would it be like some eye-opening experiences for you personally in this regard and in your experience?
Oh, well, coming to Portugal and experiencing Portugal and the beauty and the culture. I mean, going to a jazz bar and listening to some phenomenal music and eating great seafood. I mean, that's an experience that, you might find a Portuguese restaurant somewhere in your city, but you're not going to have that same ambiance, that walk in the evening down the street with the small cobblestones. And that's a unique experience, right? And seeing the water and you can't get that from, sitting in a city. Phenomenal experiences. I had a wonderful trip to Italy this year with an amazing array of experiences, from just touring to a wedding of a dear friend's daughter, to the time in Cinque Terre and Porto Venere with the swimming at the surf club. These experiences are phenomenal. I could have done it locally and swam in the Gulf or gone to the beach here, but that experience in Italy gave me so much more culture and understanding of another lifestyle, which grew on me dramatically. Going to Asia Pacific and my first travels into China, Shanghai juxtaposed to Beijing. That's an amazing experience. Going to India the first time and seeing the hustle and bustle of Delhi, and how did it work? How did these cars know when to turn? And unbelievable. While cows are crossing the street, amazing. Those experiences, you can't get them in a HoloLens or in anything other than being there and seeing it and going to Singapore the first time, the time it took to get there, and now it's transformed, right? It looks completely different than when I was there years ago. That experience, meeting the people, the cultures, sitting outside and eating food on the quay that's spelled K. Anyway, those are things that you can't get sitting in your apartment and kind of looking at a screen and watching videos. That's something you got to get up and go, and from that you mature as a human. You do experience the anxiety of travel, right? How do I get from point A to point B? How do I catch that flight, that train, that bus? But that helps you mature as a human and start to join a much bigger culture. Those experiences. One of the best that I ever had, I went to a conference, it was called ASTA, American Society of Travel Agents, and it was in Cairo. And I remember just being completely mesmerized by the city and the people. They were as cordial and wonderful as you could ever imagine. Going to certain bars or speakeasies, as they were called, in the old town, seeing a dramatic Bedouin banquet in the desert, right under the stars and surrounded by the pyramids, with military parade on camels with flags and fireworks. And I mean, what it did to me as a 20-something-year-old, it kind of opened my eyes. It really did. And travel became something more than just a job. And that's what I think is so important that we continue to push, is that it's so easy to become, I don't want to say lazy, but to sit in front of a screen and let that be your experience. But I think you're cheating yourself if that's what you do, that you really do need to get out and get those experiences. And like I said in the beginning, that breaks down barriers. It introduces you to people that you never would have met before. You may have had different positions in life, but you come together over this unique experience that Bedouin banquet. Phenomenal.
Yeah, I can imagine. And is there anything on your bucket list that you really, really want to do, like in the near future?
Well, first, I want to change it from bucket list to live your life list. We don't want to throw stuff in a bucket, right? This is a live your life list. And there's a lot. I mean, I'd love to go back to Australia and actually see New Zealand and tour Australia. I'd love to go to the South Pacific. It looks so romantic and beautiful. I'd love to go there. Obviously, you saw that volcano explosion in Tonga. Yeah, what is out there? Let's explore that. Asia Pacific, I've not been in a long time. I'd love to go back. I have dear friends, and there's something amazing about Hong Kong that I just love. Beijing as well, right? Europe. I want to come back and see you guys in Portugal and then Lisboa, right? It's you got to travel. You got to see friends. You got to go and just experience and new countries. I'd really like to explore new countries I haven't been in a long time.
Great. And sort of moving on, well, it's still on the same theme, but I guess one of the things like that the pandemic and sort of shone the spotlight on was this need for sustainability in like the in destinations, but also for more conscious, sustainable travel. And I guess in the spirit of sort of creating that bridge or that understanding, what would you say are some ways that travel could contribute to this kind of social integration between not only the travelers, but also the local communities in the destinations that they visit? Because I think sometimes it's a bit of a conundrum when you think of sustainability in relation to travel with all, in all the respects, people, planet, and so on. So what ways do you think that travel could bridge that gap, specifically in terms of the tourists and like the local communities?
Yeah, and that's exactly it. It's how do you bring the local communities into the experience? Hotels, I remember Great Hotels of the World had a real focus on sustainability with its hotels, its member hotels. And one of the great things that I remembered is it's engaging the community and how they work together with the community and sharing the local arts and culture and similar, so that it's not just about the consumption of things, it's how do you give back? How do you make your rooms more optimized for electricity and water and things of that nature, which is important, but also the materials you use that are sustainable. You're not just buying materials that you throw away every few years. You're repurposing them or reusing them, or you're buying materials made from recycled and similar. So there is a real focus from both the design side to optimize that sustainability and ecological friendliness, but also in how you manage waste, how you manage the farm to table type scenarios for your restaurants, right? What you do with the overabundance of food that Americans are known for. How do you give back to the society that you are operating in, right? I think there are a lot of ways that we start doing it, and it starts with that olive branch where you create an organization within your hotel, your group, your community that starts to think about that sustainability, right? How do I offer this? How do I give climate or carbon credits to my travelers? It's an initial phase where you're just throwing money at it, but maybe that's the start that gets people thinking. Do you have, especially with the way you sell now, can I set up a day where I'm on vacation and I go and I give back, where I donate things, time, materials, whatever it might be, into the local community, making it a sustainable relationship between the property and the people, right? I think it's thinking about it allows you to then start actioning it. And that's the first step in us getting on this journey, and recognizing it too, right? That it is something that we want to leave to our children and our children's children, and not just destroy it ourselves.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you mentioned, and something I see, because like I'm part of some like digital nomad groups, and again, this could be like what we discussed in terms of like the social media mask, as it were, and like the disagreements coming out to play. But something that that I think is quite, it's I don't know if there's like a lot of quantitative data to back this up, but like in these sort of expat digital nomad groups, there's always this question of like, how can we interact with more local residents, or like there's pressure with the local residents because the prices of housing are going up and things like that. I don't know if there's like any, in your opinion, or like practical ways that things like that could be addressed in terms of like the specifically looking, I guess, at the social element of sustainability. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, again, I think how are you as a property or as a activist thinking about the community? Because it's not one person that can do it. It takes a village, as some people say. It takes a community to come together and address it. And even just creating a mission statement and a vision of where you want to go as a business or as a human. I want to do the right thing. I don't want to stay in some of these places that aren't thinking sustainable. So maybe I start researching that. And there are a number of consultants out there that are helping properties, communities, airlines, and others think through that. Companies like Schneider Electric and others, that they're trying to figure out microgrids and how they can put communities together with solar and wind and electric and balance it so that there is a better experience for the operator, right? Those are important things that we need to kind of embrace. And it's not going to come easy. I mean, we have to think about these things. Nothing just falls into our lap. You have to really plan it. And I think that's what's important, is that foresight and making someone responsible for it, right?
And I guess the coordinated effort between not only the tourist businesses, but then like all the individuals involved, but then legislation as well is also a big piece.
Sure helps. Gives everyone a nudge, right?
Yeah, definitely. Cool. And so in this sort of topic, but kind of moving a bit along, you previously mentioned that you're passionate about giving back to the industry that you love. And what does that look like to you? And are there any practical ways that you're doing this right now?
Yeah, well, we do it as a firm as well. We've sponsored a number of startup opportunities, HFTP I mentioned, hospitality, financial, technical. We sponsored the E20X program at High Tech, our second year this year, and that's for all the startups. We have mentor programs. I do a lot within my own community. I do a lot within the industry to try and give back. At the events, I try and mentor and help small startups or even legacy companies. That's where the giving back, the time, the energy is important. Working on programs like this with you. How do I inspire the next generation? I've had a phenomenal 30-year career. I don't want it to end, which is why, the consulting piece, the people, the relationships, that's the part to me that's the most important of what I've learned over the years, is that we are a community, and that that's the exciting part for me. I love mentoring and helping, and can I help people every day? Yeah, that's exactly what I want to do.
And I expect, the relationships built along the way and everything learned along the way from expanding that network, I can imagine must be very rewarding, especially spanning for 30 years. So,
yeah. And I hope it goes on for generations. It's great. I love it.
I'm sure it will. Cool. And so, sort of moving on to some other trends that are top of mind. And obviously, there's always been this, and this is something it's like gospel that we preach at Guest Centric, is the drive direct. piece. And so as online distribution continues to evolve, we're seeing a lot of new channels sort of popping up. And what would you say are like 1 to 3 channels that you could see as having a significant impact on hotels and the wider industry in the next like 5 to 10 years, and why?
Wow. Well, the thing is, you're always going to have kind of the OTA because the intermediary, they can add more value than just being a technology, right? They add intelligence, they add experience. They're able to curate and do things that make first-time or early travelers have a better understanding. There's this really neat tool called the Google. I think that will continue to evolve and help travelers. I think Microsoft and Bing are going to continue to evolve because of AI, and the embrace of AI really is going to help travelers identify more opportunities. Maybe their preferences will help funnel to make it easier to choose opportunities for travel. But that's where I see the channels continuing to evolve, to being more personalized, having my own curated offers and similar that will come. I can only envision Microsoft thinking, how can I embed travel booking into my calendar? Because my calendar sees everything I'm doing. It might then see that I'm supposed to be in this city and might recommend, based on my own preferences, which hotel group or chain or independent that's sustainable. And how do I get to and fro my Uber or my Lyft or whatever my local rent-a-car might be, or motorcycle. If I'm in Asia, it might be easier to get around. So those are the things that I see evolving. Whether it's, American Express or Expedia, or that's hard to predict because businesses come and go. They consolidate, as we've seen. So, is Marriott going to evolve like Airbnb, and Marriott.com might become the next real travel focus? That's a lot of what we're looking at. We watched Hyatt with their acquisition of Apple Leisure Group, and they have a very unique position now with the ability to have all of the technology that Apple Leisure Group had on the leisure side marry the large corporate entity and branded entity of Hyatt with all of their new brands. How does that come together where not many hotel companies have that type of capability? That's what I'm looking at and interested. Citizen M, very unique brand. How do they evolve and create more loyalty for their guests that become a destination for travel, right? Will the airline take over? Will the destinations take over? That's the part that, I don't think we've seen that decision made yet. I think that's the part we're in right now, that evolution of who is going to take the dominance. But right now we've seen the Google, the TripAdvisor, the Expedia, the Booking, those intermediaries who are spending a lot more money on the technology are driving more engagement. Now, how does that translate to hotels and hotel companies and airlines and similar? I think they need to have that same type of focus on investment in technologies. How do I make that experience similar for my guests? And that's the tug of war that's going to go on. But for a while, I think it's going to be the search engines that drive a majority of the travel sales.
You touched a bit on the smaller independent companies and how they could think about investment in the technologies to address this multitude of channels. And I guess, as especially a small independent hotel, it's like, okay, what do we invest in when there's so much going on? And given your expertise, obviously, in technology, how would you say that hotels can leverage technology to maintain a competitive edge in their online distribution, but also optimize their direct business?
Well, I think, again, the fact that they just think that way is the start. I need to optimize. I need to embrace technology. I can't just keep putting humans in the middle. I need to start to find ways that I can use the technology to make my job easier to operate as a hotelier. I think it starts with just that thinking, right? I mentioned earlier design-led thinking. Well, how do I think through the process? How do I bring this technology? Because we've brought other technologies into the industry. AI is just a technology. So how am I thinking about it? And how do I then deploy it for the right business reasons versus just AI washing everything, right? You can't justify that. It doesn't make sense, especially if I don't have that budget. So who are the companies that are using these technologies? How are they enabling smaller properties to use those technologies? That's what I would be doing. I'd form a small group of my, cross-functional team, someone who's really interested in learning and reading about this, and let them go. Let them come back after a week or two exploring and say, this is what I thought about, and share it with the cross-functional team. Because the front office wants to know that what they need is taken care of. The back office wants the same thing. Revenue and sales has their needs. How does everyone get their needs and requirements into this group thing? And that's going to enable the small property to identify, what? We can add a chatbot to our website so that we could have the frequently asked questions resolved. We could actually use some technologies for guest engagement so that we don't get as many phone calls at the front desk. So now we could be more engaged with the guests, and the technology starts to answer some of the what time's breakfast, when do I have to check out, that type of stuff. Some of the curated experiences that I can now bundle into my offerings. How do I bundle that and create what's normally just a standard room? How do I turn that into a wellness room? Or how do I turn that into a cityscape room? Because it's got amazing views and I can charge differently. I can provide an experience, and I'm using my existing infrastructure, but I'm embellishing it with technology or the latest in technology, right? And I think that's part of the experience is how do I translate it into my own language? How do I make it work for my environment? And it's going to be relying on third parties for a little while because of the expense, right? I need a central res company that has a booking engine integrated with a CRM. So now I could recognize my guest. I could recognize them on the website. I could reward them. I could track them. I could find them on Google after they left my pages because they're just shopping. And I could retarget and give them a better experience. That's starting to use the technology and appeal to the consumer, right? And I think that's part of the journey. It's starting that way, right?
And I guess also doing actions or having things in place that the conversions are there. So you have the third party that's helping with the visibility, but then you have your other pieces in place that, like, when people go in, they don't want to leave. They're like, they fall in love with your property. And what would you say would be some of the key to like balancing all of that out, like your direct channel with all the external channels? Like, would you say starting small and then scaling? How should hotels like go about looking at this, knowing what channels to sort of prioritize in their strategy?
It's thinking about your property and your property type, your location, your business mix. Am I closer to corporates? Am I closer to communities? If it's community, am I reaching out to the places of worship to say that if you have people coming in town, or if someone has an incident and they lose their home, think of me, the baseline. How do I now start to appeal to others within that environment and distribution? Where is my business coming from? Where are the flights coming in from? What channels do those markets use? And I start to work through that to figure out what's the right balance. Because now I also want to yield and manage my inventory. so that maybe I'm not giving as many discounted corporate rooms. I have more leisure business, then I could charge a little bit more because I'm giving them some of the better rooms, and the corporates take some of the lesser rooms. It's figuring out your property, your mix, the balance, where you're deriving business, that marketing term personas. Who are you selling to? Who's the audience? How do you need to communicate with them? What are their interests? What are you doing to talk to your existing guests to find out what they want so that you could better appeal to them to come back or to target others that are just like them, the personas, right? And I think that helps you refine your channels of distribution. But then also you have to use your analysis. I want to analyze the costs of each of these channels. I want to understand which ones are good for me, which ones are costing me more money, but they're bringing me net new customers that I never would have had, which is how we used to use OTAs, because they spend so much money attracting those eyeballs. I don't have that budget. So I'm going to rely a portion of my business on the OTAs to bring me new customers. But then once they get to my property, I'm going to win them over. They're going to be mine. I'm going to make sure I communicate with them. Once they finish, how do I inspire them to want to come back or to tell two friends and so on of their experiences? What am I doing to enable them to share their experience? What if I gave them something that said, you have a friend come visit, we'll discount your next stay by X%. I mean, there's so many ways you could start working with your channels, with your personas, and understanding your audience. That helps to fill in, where do I derive my business from?
Makes sense. And in
There you
terms
go.
of, yeah, looking at these sort of, and going back to what we touched on in terms of generative AI and how it's, impacting and set to impact the industry, we're seeing a lot of the big players kind of roll out these technologies more and more in terms, to make the customer journey more seamless. How do you see this developing for hotels specifically, and why in like the next, 5 to 10 years?
Oh, that's forever in this day and age. I see them using it now. I see content being created. I see them using it to figure out when are the right times or events that are happening in a market that I now need to create packages. So they're using it to help understand and build offers and opportunity more operationally right now. I've seen a few technologies where they're starting to use it on the training side, running their manuals through it and refining their messaging. And even some of the AI is helping in the development and coding side, where it's able to map rooms and rates and do a lot with some of the function of the technologies. I see that continuing. I also think that people are starting to use it in their communications. I've used it a number of times in generating a report or creating a sell letter or a promotional piece, or it's fun to use. And that's where I think you need to start playing with it. What extensions have you added to your phone? What are you using on your desktop? I always have ChatGPT available on my desktop. So even if I'm writing a note to my team, there are times I might run it through ChatGPT just with a prompt, asking it to make it more understandable or make it relatable or do something that's prompting it to improve or optimize what I've done, right? That's where I think humans using AI are going to be the ones that are driving the net new. And I think that's the exciting point, is just experimenting and playing with it.
Yeah, I think from a consumer, and especially in the context of travel, and I mentioned the flight, booking the flight analogy, but like something, if there's, when it develops more and more that it, sort of simplifies that journey of planning and booking a trip in any, where you can just get that specific information. I don't know. I would like to see that from the consumer perspective. So it'd be interesting to see how that how that plays out. And in the future, I guess, as more like hotels adopt these technologies in the context of distribution and other areas of their business, how could it be harnessed, I guess, to personalize that booking experience for travels and to increase customer engagement, but then also drive more direct business for the hotels?
Wow, that's a loaded question. I mean, the optimization we kind of talked about. How do I use it to improve my content? How do I use it to speak? You know, I want to speak to baby boomers, and you prompt the chat GPT to help you generate content for that. That's all an experiment. It's all testing the fences, as they said in Jurassic Park, right? So I think the more you experiment with it, the more comfortable you get using it. There are small companies out there. I know one agency right now, some friends of mine, 3 and 6, that are testing AI in how do they deploy rates? How do they help create promos? How do they do things around content? What if there's no photo? Can they generate a unique photo from a descriptive that allows them to fill a page or share an experience or a view? I think those are the experiments that I'm interested in. There are a number of guest engagement platforms out there that are starting to use AI and machine learning to help optimize the operation, right? So understanding where my guests are going, where my colleagues are going, who can service someone faster, how can I tick off this maintenance request? How do I have precognition that something's wrong with an air conditioner, an HVAC, or with a room, a bulb or similar that I need to replace before it goes out, before a consumer's there? Those operational optimizations are what's happening right now. The consumer side is going to take a little bit longer because I need to put it in the path of the transaction, of the engagement. That's going to take a little bit longer because it needs to learn. And it's right in its nascent stage. It's just learning. I think we saw that with IBM Watson, how hard it was because some brilliant minds were behind it, but how much time it took to implement it and for the system to learn. It was trying to be concierge and recommend, and sometimes it doesn't have that skill set yet. So the consumer facing side, I think, is going to take a little bit more time, but I promise you people are working on it, because what they're trying to do, again, is recognize you and provide an offer that matches what you might want. So it's going to understand where you're coming from, your IP, your destination, what time of day or night. All of those things then start to form how it coalesces and presents an offer. Back to you and travel, it's going to start learning about you and your needs based on your questions, the time you came on, the site you're coming from. All of those inputs and variables become information that the algorithms discern and will start to present offerings to you. But we're so far away from everything being integrated. That's the interesting thing that we've been finding, is that many hotels don't have a CIO or CTO that's sharing that vision of interoperability. You have owners that are many times real estate folks who don't necessarily understand the hospitality business. That's what's happening. It all has to come together, and that's what you're starting to see now. There'll be some growing pains, but I think people are on the right journey now. They're starting to see what it can do, the power. They're starting to experience it in some things. You're going to see Mission Impossible, this movie coming out, and the protagonist in this movie is AI.
Yeah.
So the world is changing, and the perception of technology and how we engage with it is changing. And that's going to help our journey.
And let's say there's like a smaller hotel or a group or something that hasn't sort of embraced this trend as of yet. Where would you say would be like ground zero for them? Where should they start in terms of investing in this direction and sort of scaling up from there?
So first and foremost, I'd start talking to my existing vendors. I bring them in and find out what they're doing. If that's the path you want to go down, then I'd start talking to the vendors to find out what they're doing, because you're not going to go out as a hotelier and invent it. You need someone to deliver it for you and to make it work for you, first time and every time, because that's what hospitality is about. I need to take care of my guest. I don't need to confound them with technology just for the use of technology. So if I'm a small property, how do I want to deploy it? Maybe I do want to take some of the calls off of my front desk and run it through a chatbot, a guest engagement app. Or maybe I want to start exploring what it does on my website. How do I add some value there? How do I bring in some artificial intelligence into my website so that I'm starting to touch on these things? How do I optimize my operation with it? Maybe it's deploying revenue management with AI. There's so many ways you could start touching into it. It starts with, where do I want to add this type of experience into my existing business? Where does it make sense? Where am I touching the consumer, right? And that's how you start to think about it. And more importantly, find someone on site or in your property that is genuinely interested in it and may even have an aptitude, because they'll take it much farther than you will. Even though you think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread, sometimes there are people, smarter than you. Use them, deploy them to help you. That's where I think small properties should start thinking about it. In your next gathering, in your general assembly, talk to your team. Your people are your greatest asset, and I will continue to believe that. The building is the building, but it's your people, and how they help you is going to matter in how you get to the next level of operation.
And I guess the next question I would have on the back of that, sort of leading to the next level of operation, and what you said about, like, it's not AI taking over, it's the people behind it.
People using it. Yep.
Yeah, the people using it. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. No problem.
Good correction there. But what would you say, like, how could the industry, I guess, sort of nurture that next generation of talent that will be, I guess, the driving force, as it were, behind these different technological trends as they develop in the coming years? What would you say are some ways the industry can do this?
Yeah, develop a role specifically for it. Security became really important the past few years. There's a specific role, Chief Security Officer, CISO, right? That's specific to, how do I protect my data, my PII? How do I protect my infrastructure from hacking? That's a specific role. Do I have someone who's in a specific role of, how do I bring AI into my business? How do I optimize my business? Am I talking to those who understand technology, or am I talking to people who know the hospitality business and they're going to protect their fiefdom of the way it's always been done? Oh, we can't do that. That's not hospitable. We don't want technology doing that. Why don't we? Let's explore. Let's test it. Let's ask our guests, right? And I think that's the first step, is finding people who are interested enough to want to do the research. It's hard. It's not going to be easy. Change is hard. And that's what we're going through. It's transformation. And I think Heidegger once said, the only path to real change comes through pain. It has to be painful enough to make you want to change your behavior. That's where we're at. It's hard to get labor. It's hard to find people. Immigration is broken in many countries. How do I find the right resources? And it's not rushing to the lowest salaried person that I can employ so I could keep putting people at the front desk. Maybe it's finding the right people. Maybe it's paying them a little bit more to being a assistant manager at the front desk and responsible for guest engagement. And they'll start to solve the problems for you. Or they'll start to figure out that they need expertise to do that, and they'll work collaboratively with you. So I believe it always comes back to the people in the organization. the culture. How do I hire the right people that ask the right questions to help me achieve this goal? And it's a measured goal. I can track my expenditure to revenue. I could track all of this. So I still think it's all about people, hiring the right people, having the right team, deploying the right culture, not being fearful of making mistakes, but also being very cautious about making mistakes because they can be expensive, right? So yeah, culture, people.
Yeah, and I guess also maybe more of a mindset of using the technology to free up your people to add more value in terms of the service and everything like that. Well, I think that brings us, actually, we're kind of out of time now for today. But just before we go, we're obviously coming to the end of 2023, and with the new year ahead, what would you say is your one or your top wish for the new year coming up for the industry?
My top wish: peace on earth, goodwill to man. That's what I want. I want the world to heal. There's too much anger, hostility, violence. If we come together, we can solve a lot of problems. So my one wish is that we really do start to heal, that we care about each other more as human beings, earthlings, than our respective tribes or cults. And that's what I'm hoping. Because I think there's so much richness in sharing each other's cultures and experiencing more. If we get out of kind of the day to day and kind of look beyond that, that's where we need to get to. And I realize, there are a lot of people that are suffering that don't have, and the financial challenges of the world right now are pretty daunting. So I just encourage people to find kindness and to keep exploring how to be kind to others. That's what my wish is.
Well, that's a very good way to end this note. And I'm sure with you have this kind of, I would say, infectious level of optimism, pardon the pun, which I think also does a lot of help in terms of I guess, bridging these gaps between understanding of people. And let's see what comes next in the next year. Well, anyways, thank you so much, David. It was great to have you. And thank you, everyone, for watching. And we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you, Melissa. Take care, everyone. Be good to each other.